Hi, Tony DeWitt here, Missouri Appellate Attorney and a guy who likes to make the law make sense on YouTube. Today we're going to talk about the closing arguments in the YNW Melly trial, and I'll try to give you my thoughts with respect to how each of the two lawyers did. So stay tuned for just a little bit, and if you would, when you have the opportunity to comment on this, if you would let me know what you think the jury verdict will be in this case, I would love to hear that. So, as you probably know by now, the theory is that Janelle Demmons shot his two friends, two lifelong friends, in the head and then staged a drive-by shooting. There were no witnesses to this other than Bortland Henry, if he's a witness at all, and Bortland has been charged himself in the crime, although his case was severed from that of Jamel's so that they could be tried separately. And that was to establish, to reduce the prejudice that would flow from one to the other if one of them was found guilty. But just as the prejudice ensues to the defendant, it also sometimes falls off on the state, and the state now has two people charged for the same crime, and so it's really it has to travel very carefully down that path that it doesn't wind up throwing this case under the bus in order to get Bortland Henry later on. Now, the state has the burden of proof, and that's a pretty awesome burden in a criminal case. You have to prove your case beyond a reasonable doubt. They have hundreds of exhibits, and they have a lot of information to go through with the jury in what amounts to a limited amount of time. You only get so much time to close your case. And so it's up to the prosecutor in her closing argument, at least in her initial closing argument, to nail down all the sides of the pyramid with respect to what happened. And you'll see her start in this opening segment to do just that. Let's take a listen as she goes through the first little part of this with respect to the shooting itself. And when you look at it, listen to the tone, listen to the pace, and listen to the counselor's affect in terms of, is she angry? Is she unprofessional? Is there anything about her that's off-putting? And then we'll discuss that in just a second.
We have two dead bodies that are dropped off at Memorial Miramar. Christopher Thomas and Anthony Williams. You have Bortland Henry, who's lying about anything and everything. He's lying about the location of where it happened. He's lying about when it happened. He's lying about Mr. Demmons, the defendant, being in the car at any point that evening. Totally omits that. We then have the cover-up that begins. So the question is why? Why does there need to be cover-up? Because there was a murder that was committed, ladies and gentlemen, that's why. There are two murders that were committed. And so from here, we're going to talk about and explain what we have, right? So Detective Moretti and the Miramar Police Department have to answer 4 questions. Who, what, when, and where. And so for the where, I want to start with where did the lethal shots come from? And let's start and focus on that part of the investigation. So the where, we looked at Chris Williams. If you remember, Sergeant Williams came in and testified and showed you how Blue Star works, showed you how shooting reconstructions are done with the trajectory rods. Just explained how Miramar had made a good attempt, but they lacked training. So he came in and went through and is able to explain, as an expert in shooting reconstruction, what happened in this car. So we're going to start on the trajectory rods. If you recall, on the outside, the most important aspect of the ones on the outside of the car is they show that this was not a drive-by. That they're coming in at 90 degrees, that there's no keyholing. If you remember, you learned about keyholing. That would be an angle of entry on that.
I think sometimes it's hard for women to work in a profession where they have to prosecute criminals because they either come off as less than feminine or they come off as just frankly a terror. And I think she's doing a good job of bridging the middle distance here. She is pointed, she is poised, she is professional, her tone of voice is appropriate to the subject matter, and she's going through this in a step-by-step, very logical way, which sets things up for a good closing argument. Now let's look at this next little bit, and I'll tell you what I think about that.
Detective Moretti talked to you about driving that route, and rather than spend 45 minutes doing that drive, he instead did the 16-minute version flying over to be able to show you all of these locations in a much quicker, expedient process. So you know that the red Mitsubishi goes 30 miles in 30 minutes. That's an average speed of 60 miles an hour. And so you have in that the phone of Dontavius Withers. Mr. Withers has been identified as the person who was driving. And you have Travion Glass in that front passenger seat. Ladies and gentlemen, watch that video, please. You can see Mr. Glass moving his hands. You can see that he's awake at the time at this guard gate. Watch it. If you need help again, we're happy to assist. So then we have 4:03 a.m. So at 4:03 a.m., ladies and gentlemen, we have a very specific location the network thinks the phone is. And this goes back to being in the big city, right? We're here in this courtroom. Right there we can see 3rd Avenue out the window. We can see the New River. Phone doesn't know if we're on the 4th floor, 5th floor, 6th floor. But we could be anywhere in this building, right? That's the beauty of Pembroke Road and US 27. Because what you've learned, ladies and gentlemen, is that on the west side of Highway US 27, there is a canal. You've learned that 208 Avenue is gated on the north and the south ends. That there is a Pembroke Pines fire training facility out there, so it's locked.
So in this case, one of the things that I think they've done very well is use the phones. Now the defense takes the position that, well, everybody used the phone and you don't really know whose phone it was and when it was being used. But there is a presumption, I think, reasonable people would admit that for the most part, when you're using somebody else's phone, you have to do so with permission. You have to ask. And although that doesn't seem to be what the people in this group are telling the jury, I think it goes against the common experience. This is a very methodical and exceptionally well done explanation of how the phones are used to track these individuals during the period of times that are at issue and set up the evidence as it's coming in about people, places, and things. Again, the prosecutor here is doing a good job of explaining highly technical stuff in ways that make a great deal of sense.
So, motive. We talked long and hard how we don't have to prove motive. Motive is intent. Intent is an action of the mind. So I'll give you motives. Anger. Greed. Resentment. Advancement in the gang. You heard $16 million was coming into Jameson Francois, and that you saw $15,000, $10,000 payments going to Mr. Demons. Simple math. Splitting something 4 ways or 2 ways with Mr. Henry, who wasn't smart enough to even properly give a statement to keep Mr. Demons away from the car.
Prosecutors always say that they don't need to prove motive, but they always try to prove motive or at least throw it out there because somebody needs to understand why. Why would you kill your best friends? Why would you kill people you were in business with? What is so wrong in this relationship? And how can it be that you're going to kill these people who are riding in the same vehicle with you? If those people knew that you were that angry with them, I don't think they'd be riding in the same vehicle with you, and particularly not on a dark night when things could clearly go out of hand, and that's apparently what they did. I thought she did a nice job of just kind of wrapping all of that up with regard to the motive in the case. And so now let's take a look at what the defense is going to do, which is predominantly it's going to poke holes in the state's case.
Where is the fire? Was the message. They say it refers to guns. That's their interpretation. My interpretation, based upon the evidence, is where's the weed, the marijuana? That's the problem here, folks. They're interpreting it as opposed to calling these various people to tell you what they mean. They mentioned Frederick Gibbons, Frito Bang, Mariah Hamilton, Peasy, Patrick DeLoach, Dontavius Withers.
Objection, Your Honor, Albert.
They opened the door. See? We don't have a burden. As the court told you in jury selection.
I think he makes a good point here that there's an awful lot of interpreting going on that perhaps should have been spelled out in the evidence that wasn't spelled out in the evidence. But again, we ask jurors to use their common sense to figure out exactly what it is that people are talking about, particularly when they're talking in these kinds of codes. The jury did get a little assistance from one of the people who specializes in gangs. Whether it was enough will be hard to tell. But I think he makes a good point here. You're interpreting. You're not showing us with evidence. You're offering your interpretation, not telling us what these folks meant when they said that.
Ask yourself. They keep telling you to use your common sense. Use your common sense, please. Ask yourself why a lead detective of a double homicide would not ask Jameson Francois, where the hell are the guns? Where the hell are the locks that belong to the guns? Where are they? I suggest to you when you use your common sense, you're going to say, he doesn't want to know. Because, God forbid, those, or one of those, could be the murder weapon. And then, the investigation of this rap star is down the tubes.
And he was doing so good. You know, sometimes in the zeal to prove your client didn't do something, you just get a little bit over your skis and you go a little bit too far. It doesn't make any sense that the cops wouldn't want the guns. They want the person who did this. If they wanted the guns, they would have, and they had the ability to get the guns, they would have already gotten them. They executed search warrants. Why wouldn't they ask this guy where those guns were? I don't know. But I don't think you can rationally believe that it's because they didn't want to find out because they might be the murder weapons. That was the whole point of the search warrants, was to find the murder weapons. You know, there is sometimes a logical disconnect when you're advocating, and I just think he got kind of carried away here.
Well, as AD told you, there was a contract. People were going to lose a lot of money. And he happens to be at the tender age at that time of 19, a professional. And we all know, and unfortunately, probably a lot of us have had to do something while we are suffering an illness or a death in our family. What does that prove? Absolutely nothing. Other than at the tender age of 19, this kid, I say kid, I shouldn't say that. This man, young adult, is a professional. They say because you didn't show up at one or two jobs, then what the heck? They have no idea what the contract was. They have no idea how much money was involved. They have absolutely no idea. Why? Because there was no investigation. Play this. And they want you to believe that he's a cold-hearted murderer. When quite to the contrary. You saw the tapes. You saw that he's a nice young man.
Well, if saying it made it so, I suspect that that would have been a really good argument, but I don't think that with all of the tattoos and with the content that he has recorded, including Murder on My Mind, that you can not at least feel the pull that maybe he's not such a nice young man. We'll just have to see what the jury thinks about that. Now, I'm having trouble downloading the footage from the prosecutor's rebuttal, but the prosecutor's rebuttal was very effective, I thought, in answering the issues that he raised. She explained how he had kind of manipulated the facts just a little bit to make it look different than they actually were. And, whether or not that'll be effective with the jury, I don't know. And I think that it's really important for people to realize that what it really comes down to, what I think, what the prosecutor thinks, what Adelson, the defense attorney, thinks, none of that matters. It only matters what the jury thinks. We'll have to wait a couple of days probably to find that out. So thank you very much for watching. If you have enjoyed this, please leave me some comments down below. Tell me what you think the verdict's going to be. And try and do something nice for somebody today if you have the opportunity. We'll catch you down here at the beach tomorrow. And we'll let you know as soon as we know what the verdict is. If you like this video, here are a few others you might try, and don't forget to subscribe. Have a terrific day, guys.